Good morning. I'm Jamie from Not So Wimpy Teacher, and today, New Year's Eve, is the last day in a video series that I have been doing all about teaching reading. So I know some of you have been here for the whole series, and some of you might be popping in for your very first video, and that's fine too. If you missed any of the videos, you can still watch them on my Facebook page. My Facebook page is called Not So Wimpy Teacher. It's different than my groups. It's just a Facebook page. Go ahead and search Not So Wimpy Teacher if you're not already following. And there's a tab up at the top called Videos. If you click on it, you'll see the last 4 videos that I did about in this series. They'll be the first 4 that appear. I did one about the reading whole group mini lesson, and then I did one about independent reading time. I did a video about teaching your students how to respond to text. And then yesterday I did one about my reading centers. So today we're going to talk about my small reading groups and what I did with my small reading groups. So if you're looking for some ideas for revamping your reading groups or making them simpler or more fun, then this is the right place for you. Also, I wanted to let you know that there will be some giveaways during my live. For those of you who are watching it live, you're entered to win. So as long as you're here watching it live, you have a chance of winning. So you might want to stick around, see if you are a winner. All right. So today, I told you we're talking about small groups, and yet my slide says book clubs. And some people might be surprised to find out that book clubs are what I do with my small groups. So tell me, have you ever done a book club, either with a small group of students or maybe your whole class? Have you ever done what you would consider to be a book club? Because I think there's lots of different types of book clubs you could do. But have you ever done something you would consider to be a book club in your own classroom? I'm curious where we're starting from. That's fine. Some people say, I don't even know what a book club is. That's fine. I think that I can give you some really good ideas. And this may be something you want to try in your room, and it may not be, but every classroom is different. Every teacher and their teaching style is different. Every group of students is different. So I thought I would give you some tools during this series that you might be able to take into your classroom and make your reading instruction a little bit more engaging, meaningful, etc. Okay, so we have probably a good mix of people who have done it, maybe done it, and some who said, I've never even heard of it. So we have a good mix. All right. I'd love to start doing them, some people said. All right, so if you've been watching these videos, then you know that my number one, absolute most important goal in teaching reading is that my students should love to read. That's my number one goal, is I want to get my students to love reading. And I do this in so many different ways, but one of the most important ways that I help them to love reading is introduce them to lots of different authors, series, genres. I'm fine with them reading graphic novels, magazines, how-to books, whatever it is that sparks an interest for them. And as soon as you get a kiddo interested in some sort of topic and you can put a book in front of them, that's how you create a lifelong reader, someone who loves to read, someone who will pick up a book when you are not there, someone who will pick up a book when they don't have to. And that's my ultimate goal as a reading teacher, is to have my students want to pick up a book and read, even though it's not an assignment, something that they have to read. And so that's what all my videos have really been focusing in on, student choice and just getting lots of text in front of them, lots of different types of text, because ultimately I want my students to love reading. And that is a huge reason why I do book clubs. Book clubs for me are all about introducing different types of text to my readers. Book clubs are all about giving them like a taste, a little snippet, like they read the first book in a series and they love it and they can't wait to read the rest on their own. Or reading a book by an author and they just, wow, that's really great. And you're like, yeah, that author has 10 more books and they're in our class library. Would you like to check one out? That's what I want book clubs to do. I want book clubs to make my kids go, whoa, I need to read more. And at the same time, I use the book clubs to teach and practice the standards that I am required to teach. They are a little secondary to me. I always admit that teaching students to love to read is primary, and secondary are those standards. I have found, though, that standards just come so much easier to the student who loves to read. Okay? So, here we go. I have some teachers who are ready to start some book clubs. It's awesome. I will answer questions at the end. So make sure you can go ahead and ask them. I do my very best to answer them all. The text comes across my screen kind of fast sometimes. All right, I can see that some of the questions you're already asking, I am going to be answering. I'm glad you're enjoying these videos. I have plans to do a lot more videos this year because you guys keep telling me that this is what you like. And so I have been setting goals for 2019, and a huge one is going to be a whole lot more videos. So here we go. Let's get started. I've shown this slide before in my other videos, but it's worth just a refresher. I have 4 reading groups. I have in my class, I usually have between 24 and 28 kids. And so I need 4 reading groups. Any less would just be too many kids in a group, in my opinion, but everyone's different. So I liked to have about 4 groups, but I only met with 2 per day. 2 per day. And I know that sometimes scares people. They say, what? You're not going to meet with every single one of your readers every day. And that's true. I'm not. But I'm actually getting more minutes with them with this schedule than I was when I was trying to meet with all 4 groups. I have less transition times now, so less wasted time because we're only doing 2 rotations in a day. Therefore, I'm not wasting a whole bunch of time with students moving, getting materials out, putting materials away. And so this gives me more minutes with my groups. So at the end of the week, I actually spent more time with them than I did previously when I was trying to meet with them all in a week. Also, when they're not meeting with me, they are still doing very meaningful activities. So I don't feel like it's just something to busy them. They're not just doing busy work. They're doing meaningful activities. So this gives you just sort of an idea of what my schedule is like. If it's something that's you want to come back to and think about, you might want to screenshot it. I also have a blog series on my blog, notsowimpyteacher.com. And if you search ELA block, you'll see information all about not only my reading block, but also vocabulary, grammar, and writing. And you'll see a similar image in those posts too, as a reminder. So basically 2 rotations. So I did the exact same things on Mondays as I did Wednesdays, and then I did the same thing on Thursdays as I did on Tuesdays. And my kiddos could get really used to this sort of schedule. They would meet with me. They would do a response to reading. They would have centers time and read to self time. And all my videos have kind of talked about these different pieces of my block. So we're left with just the meet the teacher time. It's the last one we have not talked about. So if you missed any of the other videos, I went through responding to reading, the centers, and the read to self in those videos. So you might want to check those out. I did have an hour to do my rotation, so I had about 30 minutes per rotation. Throw in the transition times, and you're at about 28 minutes per rotation. So there's that. And of course, I did this after a full group lesson, so I did have time to introduce skills to the whole group. And if you want to learn more about that, I already did a video about it. All right. So this was sort of a review. Let's talk book clubs. I love book clubs. Other than read to self, I feel like the book clubs are the most meaningful thing that my kiddos are doing in reading, okay? But most importantly, this is my first thing for you. I have a couple different things that I think are super, super important. Book clubs are for every group. Every group can do a book club. Sometimes I see people say, well, I want to start a book club for my high students. And that's fabulous. Your high students are going to love it. But I sometimes think it's actually your low groups that need it the most. Oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes it's our struggling readers who think they don't like to read. And who can blame them? Reading's still hard for them. And when something's really hard, it's not generally something we choose to do with our free time. So who can blame them? The best thing we can do for these struggling readers while they're still growing is introduce them to text that they're going to find interesting and exciting. And I use book clubs to do this. If you're always giving them the little readers that come with your basil, and I understand you might have to, it's fine. But if that's all they're getting exposed to, it's not very exciting. you and I both know those readers aren't generally very good stories. They're kind of boring, right? And they don't interest all of our readers. Well, if that's the only kind of text they're really being introduced to, who can blame them for not wanting to pick up a book and read on their own? So I think the book clubs are for everyone. We just need to differentiate these book clubs so that they work for all of our groups, but that's actually very simple to do. I think every kiddo can be in a book club. I have seen first grade classes using book clubs. It's all just about what books you ask them to read, but I really feel like everyone should be introduced to real, honest to goodness, great books. Not just like phonics readers. And I understand that you may still have to do those, but hopefully you can get a little bit creative with your Meet the Teacher time and steal some away for book clubs, even if you have to put a little bit aside for a phonics practice with those intervention kiddos. It would be really awesome for them to also get to read books just like the high group. It makes them feel good. Like, what? We're going to do the same thing as that group. And they know who's the low group. They know who's the high group. You don't have to tell them. They just kind of know after a while. But to be able to do the same thing as the other groups and at the same time be introduced to maybe a series that you think they might be interested in reading on their own after the book club, it is invaluable. It's such a good use of your time. So I highly recommend trying book clubs with every group if you feel like you can handle that, okay? All right. This is my next biggie, and this is where I am very different than other people about how I do my book clubs. All right, this is the standard book club, and one that you may have done before or have experience with. You're all reading a book, and maybe you tell them exactly, like, you need to read chapter 1 by Wednesday, and okay, you are the discussion leader, and you're the word wizard, and you're the illustrator, and you're the summarizing captain. I don't know, all kinds of fun little jobs. Have you guys ever seen book clubs like that? It's really how I did book clubs at first. And it's a traditional type of book club where you have a shared text, but everyone has a different job. And those jobs would rotate, like maybe each time you met with the book clubs or once a week or what have you, they would rotate. But everyone would be given a little job to do for that reading, okay? I did this. I totally did this. And it's pretty normal. If you've done a book club like this, then you know this is pretty standard. And if you research book clubs on Teachers Pay Teachers, you're going to find all kinds of cutesy little jobs that you can do. I didn't do jobs. I got rid of them. I mean, I started using them, and here's what I found out. Like, okay, so our whole group lesson was all about how to retell a story, like summarizing it. Okay, that was our whole group lesson. That's what we've been working on. And then we come to book clubs, and I've got my group, and we're handing out jobs. One person is going to get the job of being the summarizing captain. Another person's illustrating, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with illustrating, but that's not helping them practice the skill. They're still going to be assessed on the skill, and they still have to know it. It's still a standard I'm required to teach them, but they're not actually practicing it that week. Maybe they'll practice it 2 or 3 weeks from now, and it's their turn. But wouldn't it be amazing if they were actually practicing it right now while we were learning how to? Wouldn't it be neat if the stuff I was teaching them whole group, they were able to immediately implement so that they had practiced right away and didn't forget the tools and strategies I was giving them? And I was like, of course that would make sense. And also I thought, I'm spending a lot of time assigning jobs, and then everyone has to do their job the next time you meet. And here's the thing, like, the summarizing captain will be absent that day. We wouldn't even have a summary. I'm like, that's what we're learning about, and the guy isn't even here to tell us what he wrote. Or the discussion leader would be absent. The illustrator's never absent, right? No. But kiddos would complete their jobs. They'd show up to book club and the job wasn't complete, and that kind of was a bum deal for everybody. So these jobs were super frustrating me. They just didn't seem to be helping me in my teaching of the standards and their practice of the standards. So I thought, let's ditch the jobs. And that's what I did. I ditched them. Now there isn't like everyone has a job and they got to remember it and we got to assign it and none of that. Okay? Oh my gosh, it makes it so much easier. Like the whole pressure off your shoulders. You don't have to worry about keeping track of who has what job and who did what job. None of it. But how are we going to practice those standards? We still have to do it. So everyone has the same job, and it's based on what skill we're working on that week. Everyone has the same job. So if we're working on retelling a story, guess what? Everyone in my group is going to be retelling the story, writing the summary of that chapter that they read. If we're working on context clues, every single person in my group is going to find 5 words from that chapter and context clues to help define it. We're working on character traits. Every single person in my group is going to identify the main character in the chapter and a trait to describe them. That way, everyone in the group is practicing the skill we are working on as a class. That way I know that they're getting some real genuine practice with the skills. Okay? And oh my gosh, when I started doing this, it was like, so much easier. It was less time wasted with like assigning things and keeping everyone up to date and on track, and just more time to read. And ultimately, guys, that's what we need. We need them to be spending the majority of their book club, their Meet the Teacher rotation, reading. I understand the value of some discussion and some writing, but ultimately you should look at however many minutes you have with your group, and the majority of them should be spent reading. Even if you have 15 minutes with your group, then 10 of them should be spent reading. That's my whole opinion. These are reading groups. The best thing we can do for our kiddos is spend them reading. So I took out all of the maintenance of book clubs to make more time for reading, if that makes sense. Okay, and so here's what I used for when I have book club. And I did this different ways, and I liked them both for different reasons. Sometimes I made my kiddos a packet where I photocopied a cover for each one and the different graphic organizers I was going to want to do. And it's easy to know which ones you're going to do. If you listen to my first video, I talked about how I broke up my standards into 2-week increments. You could look ahead and know exactly what your standards are going to be for the next 8-10 weeks and just make some graphic organizers for those. These are my book club graphic organizers, by the way. I'll be giving them away for free in this video. So sometimes I would just make a packet, and I'm like, okay, I know we're going to be doing retelling. I know that we're going to be covering asking and answering questions. I know we'll be doing, text features. So that was one way that you could do it. You could make a packet. Sometimes I would just print the graphic organizers and have kiddos glue them into their reading notebooks or keep them in a reading folder. Kind of depends. It just depends what kind of materials you already use in your reading groups and what you think will make it fastest and cheapest. Okay, so I thought either way totally worked. Sometimes I just kept these and they didn't have a packet, so I didn't have to worry about them losing the packet. And so the day that we were going to do this particular graphic organizer could just be sitting on the table. As soon as they got to meet the teacher, they would see it and they could just start cutting it and putting it in their reading notebook, so that I could take that 1 extra minute and make sure that the rest of my kiddos were getting where they needed to be or answering a question. So that's one way. Or just have a packet and you can keep it at your table, or they keep it in a folder and bring it to you when they come to meet the teacher. I tended to I would have like a plastic tub, like a sterilite tub, and I would keep the books that they were reading and their packets all in the tub. And then my kiddos would know as soon as they come back there to grab that tub off of my shelf, hand out the books, grab their packets. So everything was all in like one place and they didn't have to remember to bring anything with them. That kind of made it faster for most of my kiddos. But lots of different ideas how you can do this. And so they would have all their graphic organizers and they'd be ready to go. So we could focus on a skill. And the cool thing is it's easy to still spiral. I'm not saying that after 2 weeks, we don't need to practice, we're done. We can always retell a chapter even if we're working on context clues. But first and foremost, we'll do a context clues graphic organizer or 2. And then maybe one of the days that we're meeting, we'll do a retell the chapter or an ask and answer questions, just to continue to practice skills that we have already learned. That way that they're still getting that extra practice, an extra spiral. So that's the materials that I would use during my book club, but everyone's doing the same thing. And it was just so easy for me to prep and plan because I already knew which standards I'd be doing, so I could just print out graphic organizers that went along with those particular standards. My book club sets, I have them for fiction and nonfiction. In total, when you put them together, it's like 50 some graphic organizers. So I had one for every skill pretty much, and this worked out perfectly. So this is what I would use in my book clubs. And then just to give you a little look at what the schedule would look like when we're doing this. So I told you I have 30-minute rotations because I only meet with 2 groups per day, giving myself an extra big chunk of time to dig deeper, and that's important. So on average, and I mean we have a couple minutes for transitions, but we were reading for about 20 minutes, and then we were talking/writing for 10. So here's how it would go. My kiddos all come back to the table. They grab their books because they know exactly where they're at, and they're right next to my table. And we choral read. We choral read. I don't send the books home with them. It's not like a homework assignment. It's not an assignment at your desk. And here is why. And this can be really different than how a lot of people run book clubs also. I did it that way. I did the whole, you are assigned to read chapters 2 and 3. And then they would come to the table the next time we met, and they didn't read chapters 2 and 3. Didn't seem like it. And so it was a waste of our time to get together and talk about 2 and 3. So now we read together. We are reading together. It's a shared reading experience, and it makes all of our discussion more meaningful. So we choral read. We read it together. I don't generally have just one person read aloud. I tend to choral read. And the cool thing, if you have a round type of reading table, you can hear your individual readers. You really can kind of pinpoint if you're trying to listen to their fluency. You can kind of hear them. So if there's a kiddo I'm not really hearing, I just tap in front of him, and he kind of brings them back down, and he'll start reading a little bit for me. Now, as far as being distracting to other readers, well, here's what we do. First of all, I talk to, this is all part of the training at the beginning. We talked a lot about that when we were talking about independent reading. We talked about a lot of the training that would go into it. First of all, the independent readers, as they get more stamina and they're doing really good at reading, start adding in sound and distractions so that they can practice with that. Add in a distraction and see if they can keep their eyes on the book. And if they can't, you stop and you start over again the next day, just like we talked about in that video. And if you didn't watch that video, you really should, right? It's important that they learn how to read with distractions, because in our world, it's hard to find a time or a place where you can read without distractions. So this is still a really cool lesson for them. Also, my book clubs, when I'm reading with them, I do ask them to read quietly. We're still reading out loud, but we're not reading like this. We just need to read like this. That's fine, because we're all right next to each other. Does that make sense? And we kind of practice that. And if I feel like they're getting a little too loud, I just make some. Okay? And we can bring it back down. All right? But they are the only ones that should be making any noise whatsoever. All the other rotations are quiet rotations, so they should be the only ones making any noise. And yeah, it can be a little distracting, but here's one thing I used to drive me crazy when I would look up and someone who's supposed to be doing centers was sitting there listening to our book club, and I thought about it. I'm like, okay, yes, I am going to have a chat with them, but really, they're so distracted and interested in our story that they can't, they know they're supposed to be doing something else, but they can't. They stop and have to listen. There's worse things that could be going on in my classroom than a kid always so distracted and interested in a story. And so maybe I need to find another copy of that book and see if he wants to read it independently. I mean, that's one way to kind of grab their interest and use it to your advantage. I do like to read with them. I'm sitting right there with them. Sometimes I'm not reading aloud because I'm trying really hard to listen to their fluency and so forth. But for the most part, I'm reading along with them. I'm showing them what it looks like to love reading. I'm giving them an example of what good fluency sounds like. We're all reading together. And guess what? We're creating this fun experience. So I'm showing them reading's fun. Reading something you do with the people that you care about. We're all, as a classroom family, reading. And I feel like this creates a really powerful experience. My kids are excited about book clubs. My kids are never excited like, okay, let's come back to the back table and read the story of the week for the third time. That never was exciting to any of us. I also use a different book with each one of my groups. So I have 4 groups, so I'm reading 4 books at once. This makes it way more fun for me too. I don't know about you, but reading that Measles story over and over and over again, super boring. Hard to show my kids a love for reading when I really wasn't loving it. It has given me the opportunity to read some really fun books, which I'm going to talk about books that I like to read in book clubs and how to pick up books here in just a moment. So we're going to spend the majority of our time together reading. You can see that in a 30-minute club, I would spend 20 minutes reading at least. Sometimes we get so into it, it would be 25. And you know what? That's great. I did not stop them every paragraph and say, so what did so-and-so say? So what's what? I didn't. And I know that lots of us have been taught to do that when we teach reading. And if that's you and you love it, and you have lots of success with it, go for it. I always found that one, it breaks up the fluency of the story, and it doesn't give your readers that great example of what a fluent reader sounds like. It breaks up their interest in the story. They're just getting interested. They want to know what happens next, and boom, you stop them. And if you keep doing that, it's hard to comprehend and follow the story. Think about you as a reader. You're reading a good book, and your 2-year-old keeps tapping you. Mom, mom, mom. You can't get into it. You can't comprehend what's happening. It doesn't work, right? So you don't like to be interrupted in the middle of reading a good book, and they don't either. So I try to interrupt them as little as possible, okay? That doesn't mean I never stop them, because I'm a teacher and I can't help it. Sometimes I just have to ask a question. But I try to stop them very little, giving them lots of opportunity to get invested in the story and understand what fluent reading sounds like. Okay, so at the end of our groups, we will spend some time talking and or writing. Sometimes we do both, sometimes we do one or the other. We don't have to do one of these graphic organizers every single time we meet. We don't have to, especially if we ended up getting lost track of time and we're reading for 25 minutes. It's okay if we don't do a graphic organizer. Now we can have a discussion. I mean, they're really excited to talk about a book that they're interested in. And so we can have some really neat discussions that I could never have planned out on my lesson plans. Maybe in your lesson plans you put one discussion question you hope to ask, but I'm going to tell you what, the best stuff that comes is the stuff you didn't plan. So we can discuss how we would summarize a chapter together, but one kiddo might say, I don't understand. Why did he do this or that? And we can start going, I don't know. Why did he do that? What do you predict he's going to do? And the conversation could take a whole different turn and end up being better than the one I thought we were going to have. So that's what's so amazing about book clubs. So, all right. Spend the majority, even if you have 20 minutes, I would spend 15, 14 of them reading. Just the majority of it reading, talk less. But what we would do, we'd all read together and then we would talk and write together. We would tend to fill out these graphic organizers as a group, or I could tell them to turn to the person right next to them at the group, so they're kind of working in partners of the group to work on filling them out. And this could be a good time, especially with your higher groups, this could be a good time to pull a kiddo aside for a reading conference. So if you've got a lower kiddo who's struggling to find a book during independent reading time and you know he needs a little assistance, while your high kiddos are working on retelling the chapter that you just read, you could pull one kiddo for a reading conference and then head back to your table to see what they came up with. And honestly, if it takes 2 different meetings with you to fill out the graphic organizer, that's still okay. If you want them to take it back to their seats and maybe finish it the next day as morning work or what have you, you could do that. But I think the most important thing to do is to read. Read often and read lots. So I didn't stop them all the time. I know it's going to sound crazy to you, but we didn't stop and write. We didn't, we're reading books from the library and from my own personal collection, so they weren't always highlighting. I would put out Post-it notes for them, and some kiddos would grab those because they'd see a word and they're like, oh, I want to bring this up later. And so they grab a Post-it note. But for the most part, we just read. And then we would spend those last minutes working on the skill, using our book that we'd read together, working on the skill that we were learning as a whole group. And that is what I did with my small groups. Okay? So I get lots of questions about choosing books. And I got lots of people who are like, well, what book would you use if my kids were level M? And what book would you use if... And I gotta say, there's a lot of things that you can need to take into account when choosing books. I can't tell you what would be the perfect book for your kiddos. You're going to have to do a little thinking about your kiddos. And you're going to have to do a little experimenting. Maybe you try a book club and it doesn't quite hit it and you have to try a different one. And you'll learn as you go. But here's some things to consider. First of all, you do need to consider the reading level. Your high group and your low group shouldn't be reading the same book. It's okay for it to be a little above their level because they're getting lots of support during reading groups. So it's okay for them occasionally to go into that frustration level because you're there, you've got other book club members there. So if there's times where they're like, what? You're at least there to support them. Should they always be in the frustration level in book clubs? I don't think so, because that's not fun, and we always want to make reading fun. But consider their level. When I say consider their level, like I don't need to know everyone's lifestyle level and that sort of thing. As a teacher, you know better than anyone else how your kiddos read. And so I think you need to take that into consideration. If you look up books on Scholastic, or there's tons of websites you can look up that will give you lifestyle levels and all kinds of other leveling that might help you to pick books. And you might be surprised. Sometimes I'll be surprised when I look at a book. I'm like, really? That's higher lifestyle than this one? It doesn't seem like it ought to be. So you make the final decision about what makes sense level-wise for your kiddos. But if I have 4 different groups, then I probably have 4 different levels, although my middle groups are usually very similar in level, so maybe their books are similar. But definitely my high group and my low group are not reading the exact same book. That's how I'm really able to differentiate. I'm able to be doing the same activity, but still differentiate, and that makes my readers feel good, okay? Yep, I know lots of use different programs for that. This is one consideration, and shouldn't be the only consideration. A book can sometimes be a little below or a little above their level and still be a fantastic book to be read by a book club, okay? If it meets all the other criteria, you might still consider it, even if it's a little bit easier, a little bit tough, okay? The second thing to consider is your skill focus. What skills are you going to be teaching in the next several weeks? Now, how I do this, people always say, well, what would be a good book if I'm teaching main idea? What would be a good book if I'm teaching character traits? Here's what I'm going to say. If you're reading a fiction book, it's probably going to be a good book for any one of the literature standards. And if you're reading a nonfiction book, it's generally a good match for most of the informational standards. And that's why I do just literature standards first and third quarter and just informational standards second and fourth quarter. Helps me with my book clubs. So at the beginning of the year, I choose a fiction book for all my book clubs. In second quarter, I'm going to choose a nonfiction book because we're learning the nonfiction standards. So we need to have an example of a nonfiction book in order to complete graphic organizers for informational text and practice the skills we're learning. Then we can go back and do fiction. And for some of your groups, they're going to read more than one book in a quarter, and that's fine. In fact, it was usually my low groups because the lower level books are shorter and they take less time. And that's okay. I feel like sometimes as teachers, we are so used to like planning everything that book clubs can be scary because really, they're best when you don't plan it by the page. You're like, I got 20 minutes to read. Let's see how far my groups make it. Instead of like, today we'll read chapter 2, tomorrow we'll read chapter 3. Sometimes you just gotta let them go. And that means your low group finishes before your high group. So you can still do the exact same graphic organizers even though your low group's starting a new book and your high group's still working on the book they started, okay? But you do need to consider skill focus. If you're going to be teaching nonfiction standards, if you're reading a fiction book, you won't be able to practice the same standards. So definitely consider that. Next, definitely consider interest. In fact, maybe this should have been number 1, interest. I made the mistake of picking my favorite book thinking, well, it was my favorite, they'll clearly like it. So I whip out the Boxcar Children for one of my book clubs. I loved the Boxcar Children when I was young. I think I am just like Jessie, and I think Violet's cool. And I thought everyone will love the Boxcar Children. It turns out my kiddos weren't interested in it at all. They were pretty bored by it, and I couldn't understand it. And I'm pushing it like, isn't this a good book? And they're like, yeah, sure. And I realized I was picking my favorite book instead of looking at what they were reading. Pay attention to what they are reading during independent reading time. That being said, if your kids are already reading a lot by an author or a series, I wouldn't necessarily pick a book from that author or series, but rather look for books that are similar in genre. Because they're already in love with that book and series, I like my book clubs to introduce them to something new because they're going to run out of that book or that series, and they're going to need something else to read. I will never forget when my son finished reading Harry Potter. He says, Now there'll never be another good book to read. How will they ever compare to Harry Potter? So I wanted to introduce my kids to lots of different authors within their interest so that they'll have something new to read. So that once we finish this book in book club, they can't wait to read the rest of the series. So if you notice they're reading fantasy books, your class, wow, they're reading a lot of fantasy, then you're going to want to look for maybe another fantasy book during your fiction standards that they aren't necessarily reading yet. It might be one you don't have in your classroom library yet, or one you haven't noticed them picking up, one that's new maybe. But that way you're still thinking about their interests. They seem to like fantasy, but you're introducing them to something new. I like to introduce them to something new. I do not, and I talked about this during when I was talking about my own read-alouts, I don't just read a whole series to the kids. I read the first book from the series. And then I make sure other books in the series are in my classroom library for them to pick. So that I do the same with book clubs. I don't just like read a whole bunch of books by the same author or a whole bunch of books in the same series, because I want to introduce them to lots of different ones so that they can pick up the rest of the series and read during their independent time. So do consider their interest. It's so important. And like I said, it doesn't matter if your groups finish at different times. Like it really doesn't matter. My little group almost always finishes before my high group, so they just start another book. And it really does not matter that if one group's on page 20 of their book and another group's on page 80 of their book, this doesn't matter. You're still doing the exact same standards and the exact same graphic organizers in every group. So it's okay if they're at different places in the text. It doesn't matter. Okay, the other thing you really want to consider is access. You need access to multiple copies of the book. Every kiddo in your book club should have the book in front of them. It might be electronically. I know that lots of you have technology and you can, I have gotten the Kindle Fires for my class before. They're rather inexpensive, and so it was something that I invested in for my class. And we did book clubs. I bought books, Kindle books, and just put them on the Kindle Fires so we could actually use the Kindle for our book club. The kids liked it. The kids, it kind of grabs their whole like I love technology sort of interest. Me, I prefer a book with pages, and then I can use sticky notes, and I like to be able to flip back and stuff. But that's my personal preference, and I'm not going to push. If they're interested in electronic books, then go for it. But other ways to find these books, and I have a whole article on my blog about finding books for book clubs. But so you can head to my blog, Not So Wimpy Teacher, just search book clubs. You'll find all kinds of great information. But check your school library, check your public library. Check with other teachers on your team. They may have one or two in their class library. You have one or two in your class library. And before long, you're able to put together 5, 6, 7 copies of it. Also, a huge thing that I did that just made book clubs so much easier. Once I discovered that this was actually a game changer, this was the way I wanted to teach reading forevermore, I started making donors choose projects for book club sets. And so I found lots of books that I wanted to use with my book clubs and would order 8 copies of them. And that was amazing. Another thing you can do is watch the Scholastic deals. When you have extra points, use them towards book club books. Dollar books can sometimes be good book club books if everyone in your class didn't already order it. You don't want to pick a book that's so popular and kids already read it. But do a little digging. Ask around. One thing you might even do is put on your own personal Facebook page. Your friends might have some books that their kiddos have already read and don't plan to reread. And so you can ask them, hey, does anyone have any copies of Charlotte's Web that they're finished with that they might be able to donate to my classroom? You'd be surprised. There's also Facebook Marketplace type groups where people are getting rid of stuff and garage sales. Second-hand stores are awesome. They sell the books for half price, and so that's really nice. So look around your town, see if there's something like that. But once I started doing some Donors Choose projects, and I had quite a few different books that I could always choose from, so then I could go to my closet and be like, all right, what do I want to do with this particular group next quarter? I know I got to do something nonfiction. Nonfiction will be your toughest one. Fiction's a breeze to come up with books for. I do believe the nonfiction book clubs are more challenging to come up with books, but not impossible. My kiddos loved the Magic Treehouse research guides, and what's neat is you could have a group read the fiction book one quarter and they could read the nonfiction research guide the next quarter. It's really neat. And it can kind of go along with science or social studies if you pick the right topic. My kiddos would read the who was, who is books. Those aren't as engaging all on their own, but if you pick a topic that's engaging to them, then they like it. I had a group read the Babe Ruth one and they loved it, couldn't get enough of it. I had a lot of sports players in my room and they were really, really interested. But the same book on just George Washington was boring to them. So, you just got to play around with it a little bit. But the who was, who is books are actually pretty good. But do some digging and you will find nonfiction books. It's just that will be more of a challenge. So if you're getting ready to do a nonfiction book club, you're going to want to spend some time digging at the library and so forth to see if you can find some good nonfiction chapter books. But Donors Choose is a fantastic resource once you figure out a book that you really like. So that is what I would do to pick books. There is no one right book for every book club, but you know what some of your favorites are. I loved to do Frindle with my high group. It's just a fun book, and so I used to do it with my high group quite often. I like to do Magic Treehouse with my low group because that's a huge series. If I can get them to see that that's a fun series, then they're going to have books to read for a long time, and that's exciting. At the end of the year, one of my groups would do the Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. That was always fun. Lemonade Wars was another one. I love to use Lemonade Wars for book club instead of read aloud because it has math problems in it that are hard to read out loud. It's easier for my readers to see it. So Lemonade Wars worked out well with one of my higher reading groups. What are some of my other favorites? Clementine is a good one. Goonie Bird Green, if you don't read that out loud, then use it for a book club for sure. It's super fun and it's on a lower level too. So lots of great books out there, and you can go into my teacher Facebook groups if you're in them. I have a Facebook group for 2nd grade, one for 3rd, one for 4th, and one for 5th. And go into those Facebook groups and ask what books you like to use in your book clubs. And you're going to find so many different recommendations. I would have kiddos, some of my reluctant readers, if you read like a Puppy Place book, I tend to find that my kiddos like animals and that would get them interested. And there's a ton of Puppy Place and Kitten Corner books. So if you could get them interested in that, they'll have lots to read to themselves. All right. So if you have questions about book clubs, I'll go ahead and answer those for a little bit right now. I'm going to go back to my first slide. If you guys have questions that I can help you with about book clubs that I didn't already answer, then go ahead and feel free to put them here. I've got a few more minutes and I could be happy to help you out. But I hope that book clubs give you, another idea of what you could do with your kiddos during small group time. So I have I have a question like, do the kiddos have trouble keeping up with all the different books you're reading? You've got to read aloud, you've got independent reading, and you've got book clubs. And I've actually never had a problem with that. But when I do go to read aloud to them or in book clubs, we do flip back a page or two and go, okay, what was happening? Oh yeah, and then start reading. But I think that's a skill that I want to teach my readers that you should do. Look back and just make sure. So I haven't had a problem yet, but it's always possible that you'll have a kiddo here or there who does. And you might encourage him to do picture books during his read to self time. How to do small group lesson plans. Well, that's a tough one because every school, every principal is going to have a different requirement for your lesson plans. In mine, I left mine pretty basic. I would say every Monday and Wednesday, I would say on Monday, I'd say rotation 1, meet with group such and such, read from the book. And I kept it the same. I could keep all that part the same for weeks. And then I would just add in my focus skill, and it would just say complete graphic organizer. So most of it stayed the same, and I just had to switch out the focus skill every 2 weeks. And my principal was okay with that, but every school and every principal is going to be a little different about those requirements. I met with my reading groups mostly at a table. I was more comfortable that way. One year we had to meet on a carpet instead of the table. It was harder for my kiddos to write and took longer getting out clipboards and things, but I think you just make do with what you got in your classroom. I primarily taught 3rd grade with some time in 2nd, but mostly 3rd. And then I was a substitute for many, many years, and I actually student taught in 12th grade. Oh, I have some giveaways to do. Somebody needed to remind me. I almost forgot that I need to give away some of my book club sets. What do you do if a student's absent? That's a wonderful question. And in general, I find my kiddos caught up on their own. Now you can offer to let them take the book back to their seat and read it during their independent reading time to catch up. But I did find that my kiddos would listen to what the students were telling them happened last time they read and sort of catching up on their own, just as they would if they missed part of your read aloud. They tend to be able to catch up. It's kind of like when you're if you watch a soap opera but you miss Monday's show, somehow on Tuesday you can always catch up. And that's pretty much what I did, but if you want to do something more, you could have the graphic organizers for them to complete during their independent reading time. Okay, so I do need, you may ask your questions, but I do need some winners. I can't believe I almost forgot. All right, this is a winner for the book club bundle. So it's the fiction and the nonfiction put together. So it's like 50 some graphic organizers for you. And if you are on the live video, then you're already entered to win. My first winner is going to be Jenny Blackburn. Jenny Blackburn. Jenny, you are my winner. If you send me an email, I will be able to send you a resource. And those of you who have one earlier in my video series, I'll be sending out resources later today to all my winners. So make sure you've sent me an email if you were one of my winners. And if you missed any of the videos, you can catch them on my Facebook page, Not So Wimpy Teacher. Just click on the video tab. All right, I need 2 more winners. So Jenny Blackburn was my first winner. And my second winner is going to be Tori Anderson Fenton. Tori, T-O-R-I, Anderson Fenton. You're going to be my second winner. If you want to send me an email, then I can get the book club bundle out to you later today when I send all my winners their prizes. And I need 1 more winner. So I have Jenny Blackburn and Tori Anderson Fenton. And my third winner is going to be Jocelyn Ann. Jocelyn Ann, you are my third winner. You've all won my book club bundle. It's fiction and nonfiction graphic organizers for you to use in your book clubs. For the rest of you, I went ahead and I put my book clubs on sale for just today. Today only, they're 20% off, so you can grab those at a discount if you're looking at possibly starting or revamping book clubs when you head back in January. All right, I have enough time for maybe 2 more questions if you have them. I have really enjoyed doing these videos with you, and I thank you for spending a little bit of your winter break with me. I'm trying to read as quickly as I can. Sometimes the questions go too fast for me. Feel free to ask again if I didn't answer. I will go ahead and attach a link to the description of this video as soon as I'm done with the live, but I can drop one here now in the comments. If you're on your phone, the link won't work until I'm done with the video, but I will definitely update the video with a link to my book clubs in my TBT store, Not So Wimpy Teacher. So you guys are very welcome for the videos. You're very welcome. And like I said, I am going to push myself really hard to do a lot more videos in 2019 because this is what you were looking for. Would book clubs be good with homeschooling? Absolutely. Absolutely. It'd be way more engaging than trying to do a Basel, and much more cost effective for a homeschool teacher too, because a novel is so much cheaper than reading curriculum. So absolutely. All right, guys. The schedule, are you talking about the center schedule? Someone was asking about the schedule. This is my center schedule. Yes, you can find that on my blog. Go to my blog, Not So Wimpy Teacher, and search ELA, and you'll find it. You can search reading centers and you'll find it. You can always screenshot this too. All right, well, I am going to say goodbye, and I'm going to go ahead and my book club bundle is book club graphic organizers. I have a fiction and nonfiction set. I bundled them together. Nope, I don't meet once a week. It's twice. I meet twice a week with all my groups. And yes, I have a whole group lesson. I did a whole video on it, so you want to head to my Facebook page. Just check that out. All right, I just dropped a link to my book clubs, but I'm going to go ahead and update this video description with a link. And if you missed any of the videos, go ahead and go to my Facebook page, Not So Wimpy Teacher, and you can watch them, click on the video tab, and all 5 of them will be there. I will add them to my YouTube channel in January. So guys, thank you for spending some time with me, and good luck as you head back to school next week. I will be thinking about you. have a very happy New Year's.